sometimes like when you're just starting out preaching, I remember I was very nervous like to go up. I was shaking, my leg was shaking. You know, I remember one time in Mexico I had to preach. I was I think 16, and I was up there and I just had to do like a 5-minute word, and my leg is all over the place, like it's like shaking. So like, how do you know where maybe it's just like your body uncomfortable, like you yourself are uncomfortable, but maybe it's still God's like plan, like it's still God still wants you to preach, but like how do you get around the fear and all this stuff? Like how do you know that the fear isn't what it's telling you not to do it, but God still wants you to do it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's a two-part question. The first part is there's signs that, hey, maybe this isn't for me. But the second thing is most of our anxiety and our fears come from is what are other people going to think about us? Like, okay, what is, this group of people or this church gonna think about us, right? And so it becomes about you, and that's where the fear is. Like, what if I don't deliver? What if I lose my opportunity, right? It goes back to that. And that's where a lot of our anxiety comes from. Like, if you feel like this is what God is calling you to do, wants you to do, and you just do out of obedience, kind of what we spoke about, you'll be okay. I still have plenty of nerves that I got to deal with all the time. I want to make sure I'm doing a sound doctrine, right? That I'm preaching to glorify God. And so there's a lot of that. But a lot of that could be alleviated from just good preparation in His revelation. So it's like you're not. Most people will pray that God's presence is felt on the pulpit and not on their knees outside of the pulpit, right? So the revelation, the time with God has to come outside of the pulpit, right? And then the pulpit is kind of just something you deliver a time that you spent with God, a revelation that you received from God to His people. And if you kind of look at it that way, it's okay. Like for me, it's like if I go up and I preach something and I feel like that was the revelation God gave me, it's got to be sound, it's got to be biblically accurate. All of that has to be there. And if I fail, I always look at it this: what's the worst case? My pastor's going to be call me like, you can never preach again. It's like, all right, I tried. I'm gonna go back to singing.
Maybe not.
Yeah, but no, it kind of removes that pressure. So I remember going into this new church. It was like you're kind of preaching and you're like, what are they thinking? I'm new here. I'm preaching a little bit different, and then it's like, what am I doing? I'm making it all about myself, and that has to be emptied out before you enter the pulpit. And that's kind of my thing is like, I think Alistair Begg says that I fill myself with like biblical prep, and then I empty myself of all things. And then I allow God to kind of fill me into whatever I'll be speaking. And so I'm doing the same. I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to empty myself of my opinions, my agenda. Because too often people will go up there and like, oh, this is the Holy Spirit talking through me. And they'll just speak agendas and go down rabbit holes. But then people get hurt. And so for me, it's like, I want to empty myself. I want to be an empty canvas that the Holy Spirit is kind of putting in a word into me. His revelations go a lot further than Danny's revelations. And yeah, that's always my approach.
Yeah, and then so you mentioned that your brother kind of helped push you in a way to start preaching and stuff like that. When I was in Bible school, one of the most impactful things to me was having a mentor in my life. How important would you say it is for everyone, whichever season you are in life, however old you are in life, how important is it to you would you say it is to have a mentor in your life, someone you could look up to, someone you could ask questions to? And
Extremely. But I realized that, like even speaking of our culture, that isn't as important to generations to come because we're so busy building and trying to support our families. I think it's a wrong model, but I think it's extremely critical to have a role model in your life, a accountability individual that can kind of guide you and save you from a lot of grief. And that's kind of the thing is, like, I don't want to make mistakes, so I'm going to tap in. There's plenty of times where it's like, hey, do you want to be my role model? Do you want to help me in this? It becomes awkward when you have to ask for that. But even when I was a youth leader in the church, too many people were trying to have me as their role model. And I'm like, I'm missing a role model. I'm emptying myself every day, but I have no one to kind of look up to, not just to look up to, but someone that was sowing into my life. And that became like a mission. Like, who can I find, But yeah, extremely important.
So then how can you find someone? Like, who you look for?
Someone that cares and wants to be invested into you and into that process without any form of agenda. But I mean, you pray and you just like kind of seek out and get around people that are not your age and say, tap into that. But I believe our churches need to build that culture for sure.
What about like finding a mentee? Should you go out and if you see like someone younger than you that you see a lot of potential in them, should you go up to them and be like, "Can I mentor you?" Or is that maybe something that you shouldn't do? Maybe you should always wait for someone to come up to you and ask to be a mentor.
No, I don't think you should ever wait for anything. If you feel like you see something and you could benefit the kingdom and benefit and grow that individual, yeah, definitely come up and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Let's go on a coffee date, or let's go play tennis or pickleball, whatever it is, But yeah, you should never like wait until somebody comes to you. I mean, they're young, they don't know how this works, So you're going to be a little older. You're going to have a little bit more wisdom. Come up and just be a friend first off. Just show that somebody else cares, and then guide them.
How do you instill this like mentor culture in a youth?
So the way we try to do it is anybody that was older would have to like kind of have somebody that they mentor, go get a coffee date, and that was kind of intentional. And I mean, we've seen a lot of fruit in that, but it also has to be a culture where people want to do that and see a level of importance. Okay. Everybody wants a role model, but it's like, okay, well, if you can't find a role model, be one, and then maybe, you'll get one, But everybody's like sitting around like, all right, God, I just want a role model. It's so important, everybody's talking about it. I get it. But exhaust the options, become a role model, be everything that you don't have. Yeah. And then, God will always provide.